I'll call the meeting to order. Gene, it looks like you're in the office. Can you face the flag and give us a prayer and a pledge, please?
Heavenly Father, we ask that you be with us today during this meeting. We ask that you watch over everything we do, that we come together as a community and a group and accomplish the good for the county. Lord, we just ask you to be with all of our employees and the county residents today and keep everybody safe. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic for which
which it stands,
one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Could we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Knopsker,
Present.
Commissioner Bothell,
Present.
Commissioner Glover.
Here.
Thank you. Adoption of the agenda. Do we have any corrections, additions, deletions to the agenda as presented?
I do have two. One is underneath public health, underneath Tony. It's labeled a CTC contract. The actual wording is it is an EPR grant amendment for this year, not the upcoming year. We also underneath consent, I haven't added ambulance license. This is the same license you approved and signed a month ago, but RETAC misspelled their name minorly, so I'm going to have that re-signed.
Okay, and that would come under what?
Consent agenda?
On the agenda. Okay, thank you. Are there any other corrections or additions, deletions?
Under the Board of Health, I sent a list of Board of Health minutes needing to be approved, and so if we could add that approval during the Board of Health section.
We're still frozen on this end.
We hear you.
Oops, he went away.
Be nice to have normal meetings one day soon.
Tricia, do you know how soon you were needing the schools?
So the way our agenda is set up is we do our updates first, and then I have you guys first immediately following. I'm going to estimate about 30 minutes.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to call him real quick. So if you could just hang on tight, John's gonna call in. It looks like Rock Creek lost internet.
Okay, can you hear me? It's nodding. I'm sorry, everything froze up and I totally lost my Cielo internet connection there for a few minutes. Where were we when I vanished?
Public comment, I believe.
Okay,
Oh,
so
no,
we have
no,
taken care
sorry.
of modification. We did the consent agenda then? Yeah, we didn't approve it yet.
I'm not sure we've approved the minutes.
Consent agenda comes before that, right?
No,
Oh, I'm sorry, minutes. You're right, I gotta move back up. Okay, there we go. We've adopted the agenda. Approval of the minutes from previous meetings. That's May 6th, 13th, 19th, 27th, and June 3rd.
And I'd like to add Board of Health minutes, February 26th, March 30th, April 6th, April 8th, April 13th, April 15th, April 22nd, May 6th, 13th, 19th, 27th.
And those had not been approved? I thought I already signed a lot of those.
That's what Deanne said to list those numbers.
Okay, well, then we can move to approve. Ryan, a technical question for you. Do we need to, can we approve the Board of Health minutes inside this portion of the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So for those of you who can remember all of those, do we have any corrections, additions, or deletions?
I sent my corrections this morning. Not on all of those, but on the other ones.
Okay,
And there was one set of minutes that I forwarded to Dixie regarding the hearing at the last meeting. And there were some questions that Deanne had on that. And so I forwarded that to Dixie. So there could possibly be some small corrections coming from her on those.
and that would be for the June 3rd commissioner meeting?
No, I believe that was May 27th.
That being the case, should we wait on approval of the May 27th minutes until we make sure we've got those corrections?
I heard from Dixie and she had no corrections.
Did she fill in the blanks that you had asked for? Because that was the one that had, you had typed in red and had question marks like people's last names and that sort of thing.
Speaking of, she just walked in the room. We'll ask her.
Okay.
Then if you don't mind, we'll hold it till we get the answers to that.
I'm not sure if you heard that. Dixie said she'll get me those names within an hour.
Then with that understanding, do I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
As corrected, I will make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Jean? We're looking for a second, Jean.
You're muted, Jean.
Let me just, second.
Anybody understand that?
I did, because I hear him next door. That was a good. He's a go.
He's a go, he's a second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion or objections? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Now it's our time for public comment. As stated on the agenda, please limit your comments to 3 minutes for review on county matters. We will not take any formal action during this time. And the meeting will commence, the rest of the meeting will commence immediately following the public comment period. So I'm going to open it up for public comment. I see it appears to be a lot of public on board.
John, most of the public is here for the items on the agenda that I can tell.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And of course, I don't recognize some of the phone numbers or the call-in user number 1. Okay, hearing no public comment, we will move on to the rest of the meeting. Consent agenda. And under that, we're adding the ambulance, just a signature for that. Is that correct, Trish?
That's correct. It was already approved in a previous meeting. This is the same document with a small change in Monte Vista Ambulance's name.
Okay. So any comments on the consent agenda at this point?
I would move that we approve the items on the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the items on the consent agenda. Any discussion or objections? Hearing none, the motion carries. That brings us down then to county official and department head reports, starting with Dixie Dilts, the land use department. Is Dixie on?
Jean, unmute, Jean.
Good morning, everyone. I don't have a whole lot to update you on this morning. Just a quick note on the Mario Nelson, Andrew Buffington, and Christine Edelman case. We have served Mario and Andrew with their summons. They are scheduled to appear in court on August, so that should take care of that issue. I'm sending out a final letter on the camper up off of County Road 70 today and giving them their final 30 days to get that removed, or we'll issue summons on that one. There's a new blight case reported down in Monte Vista, but I haven't had a chance to go down and look at that one yet. So hopefully this afternoon I'll get that one checked out. I sent out 43 letters on short-term rentals. Of those 43, we have 37 of them are now registered with the county and in full compliance. I have 6 remaining ones that I'm still trying to get in contact with. I think that's all I've got for you at this point.
Thank you. Dixie, question on the blight case in Monte Vista. Is that within the incorporated limits of Monte Vista?
No, that would be out in the county. I
Okay.
don't handle anything inside city limits.
Right. Okay. Do we have any other questions for Dixie from the commissioners?
On the short-term rentals, was that just focused in one area, or is that countywide, or what is the?
I tried to do countywide. I just went on to VRBO and Home Away and pulled up what I could in Rio Grande County. The majority of them are in the South Fork area. We really don't have a lot of short-term rentals outside of the South Fork area, outside of municipal limits. I think I did have one up in Jasper, but that's all I have located.
And are they all set up for sales tax also, or lodging tax? I'm sorry.
Yeah, they all either provided me with a sales tax, lodging tax license number, or they provided me with a statement that they only lease through one of the major platforms, VRBO or Home Away or one of those, and those entities actually collect the tax for them.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on that? Hearing none, thank you, Dixie. We'll move on then to the building department. Randy Kern, the May update.
Pose for the camera, right? I'm gonna make a picture out of this. Good morning. So other than being really busy in the building department, I really have one thing that I wanted to bring up today with y'all. And it came from a phone call from Tyler with South Fork Fire Monday last week. And what it was, they had a fire call in Alpine Village over that weekend, prior weekend. And according to Tyler, it was an abandoned building. May have been some vagrants using it, don't know. But anyway, it kind of started this, with South Fork Fire, kind of their proposal, I guess, or the reason he called me was they would be interested in if the county had condemned any dangerous or derelict buildings, they would be interested in, if possible, utilize, if it was to be demoed anyway or something like that, they would be interested in using it as a training to go in and, burn the structure on a controlled, I guess, basis, use it for training, and then clean it up when it was done. And I guess for me, I said, well, I'll take it up the ladder and discuss it with you guys and see how you feel about it. It seems like it raises more questions than answers in my mind, and definitely a lot of legal questions. But that was the proposal. That's what he was inquiring about. So I'd start the dialogue if you guys have some thoughts or want to chime in on that.
Any comments from the commissioners? Oh, go ahead, Randy. I'm sorry if you're not done.
Yeah, I guess one thing I should say is, the county's not out house hunting for, we're not looking for trouble. Sometimes it finds us. I can't think of a building that we've actually condemned since I've been here. We have dealt with some dangerous buildings, dabbled with it, and of course the property owners always have the right to remedy it, make repairs or demo or however that goes. So it's not like we have a whole list of properties and we're not looking for them, but I don't know what more to add to that. It's kind of I get the idea, but, you know,
Do we have an address on that?
Well, legally, where would we stand if we had one like a really nasty house that we might come across, that if the owner chose not to clean it up, could we say, you know, give us the deed back or whatever, and then do that and sell it for taxes? Or I don't.
If I may make a comment here, I think most of the times that any government entity deals with maybe using a structure for fire training, generally it's at the request of the owner. I had a call last week, not related to a position in the county, about a mobile home a person has, and he just wants to get rid of it. And he said, I would offer it up for fire training, for instance. I said, well, you'd have to talk to the fire department about that. I don't know the legal ramifications and point source emissions and toxic chemicals coming off or whatever. But in my experience in the past, most of the times where a building was used for fire training, it was offered up by the owner for that purpose. Not one that the county or the city went out and tracked down and decided they were going to burn it down.
Yeah, I think the county may need to look at the situation and see if there's action that needs to be taken, either from condemnation perspective or even a public health perspective, depending on what the circumstances are. But I certainly wouldn't want to get too far ahead and start offering that up to anybody until we know what that situation looks like. And then, as Randy pointed out, there are avenues for them to remedy the situation, the owner to remedy the situation, and don't want to do anything that would constitute a taking.
So the answer to your question, Randy, is there is no answer.
Right. Well, and I agree with you. If that even is an option, I don't know whether it is or not. I don't know if any of that's been explored. That I feel would be between the property owner and the fire department. The county wouldn't be a part of that. Our role would be as if we, you know, had a dangerous building or derelict building and we decided to pursue that. But as far as the remedy, there's always more than one option. I mean, it could either be repaired or demoed, or maybe this would be another option. I don't know.
So would you be interested in an old fuel station facility that had potential contamination underground? Is the county going to buy into that, reclaiming all that? No, absolutely not. So that, you know,
So I think that's Patrick in there talking to Randy. We can't make it out, Randy. So if you wouldn't mind, help reiterate.
No, I don't need to be on the screen or anything. I'm just saying those situations, there's very specific guidelines that you have to use for live fire training through NFPA, and there's requirements that have to be met. And so if the county chooses to condemn a building, then is that from start to finish? Does the county go in and demo it and haul it off, and then now suddenly there's contamination underground? Now the county becomes responsible for that because they've ultimately initiated the process, or they've given the fire department the authority to do that. There's, like Brian said, there's a lot to explore, but there's two NFPA documents that have to be followed, the guidelines, in order to do a live fire burn. And that's with any fire department, fire district, anything. So it's a sticky wicket at best. It has liability written all over it.
Thank you, Pat. That's from a fire department perspective, I take it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on this other than it's information and something that we can deal with going forward at some other future date?
Well, I feel like I owe Tyler at least a return phone call with something. Yeah, we discussed it, and it's too complicated, too much liability, or whatever the consensus is. But I do feel like I owe him a call back, so that he knows we at least discussed it.
Okay. Well, I guess you can call him back and tell him what you heard.
Okay.
Sorry, we can't help you much more on that at this point, I don't think. Go ahead, Randy, you have an update. Oh, and before we do, Scott, Deacon, we keep getting a really good view of the inside of your ear there. So I don't know what you guys are seeing on my end. I'm trying to aim the camera so I get my best angle. But anyhow. So Randy, go ahead with your May update, if you could, please.
Well, that as far as updates, that was the big one. I was going to visit with you today. Trish told me on Monday afternoon that you'd convene as Board of Health right after my update for the variance hearing for the Davis Scala here. So that would be the next item. We're not doing that.
No, we had to, on Monday, we had to do some rescheduling because of with Patrick coming and the commissioners wanting his opinion on SRS and refuge. So
Okay, so it'll be later in the meeting then. Okay.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Okay.
So we'll get back to you, Randy. We don't want to keep you from your work, but we can get a hold of you when we get to that point if you want to. Does that work for you?
Okay. Well, do you guys have any questions for me? Again, it's everything else is status quo pretty much. We're just getting flooded with building projects, and a lot of influx of people from out of the area inquiring and about building and property here in the county. So it's keeping us busy.
Oh, yeah.
You say a lot, and we actually had building permit applications or just inquiries at this point?
Both. You see the monthly reports. I mean, they're there's a fair amount there, but a lot of inquiries by phone.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anything else for the building department? If not, we'll move on then to the airport. Jay Saracen, is he on? I can't tell from my screen.
I do not see him. I can try to get a hold of him very quickly.
You can, but if it's okay with the rest of the commissioners, we can go ahead and jump down to Pat Sullivan and his road and bridge and his report. And then when Jay gets on, we'll fit him in. Is Pat in the room there with you, Gene?
Yeah, I just had unmuted again. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Real brief. We completed all of our work on the 11 South. It's been an ongoing project. We spent about $252,000 on that mile of section. Not unusual. That's right in the ballpark. The work on the asphalt plant was completed and ready for the upcoming season. And to date, our graders have already completed close to 75% of our Schedule A road work. We installed a new cattle guard on Rock Creek, just above the Stone House, This is a joint project with BLM to help keep the cows from wanting to come down to Monte Vista. Since we can't get anything open, the cows are the only thing that are buying stuff, like hay and stuff. But anyway, we installed new culverts on County Road 28 and 28B while we were in the area. And we've utilized our crusher on several projects over the last 6 weeks. County Road 28, 29, 70, 71, and County Road 15 and 18 had all received some type of improvement using the crusher. Shop's been busy getting asphalt equipment ready for the season. And then we had Carl Hill work on building us a fuel tank / toolbox for one of the pickups. Proposed work will begin our asphalt season. We're right in the middle of that right now. Again, Masonic Park and the 3 North are our 2 projects that we're working on. And then we'll continue to grade in between projects as we can, patch potholes and those things. I wouldn't envision us starting any type of weed mowing just because we just don't have enough people. Got too many holes in the Swiss cheese. So other than that, that's the monthly report in a nutshell.
Thank you, Patrick. Have you had beaver dam problems up Rock Creek?
You know, up at the Rock Creek campground, we've got a beaver up there in that large culvert that we've had to take care of periodically. It hasn't created a whole lot of damage as far as just a little bit of water up on the roadside. And then right there at the Rock Creek gauge station, there was quite a beaver accumulation of material in that area. While we were up in the area putting in the cattle guard, we reached out to the water folks in the area there, and we cleaned that out to maybe make it a little bit easier for them to get their water. We had the bigger hole up there, so it was more functional for us to take care of it while we were right there.
Thank you. I think the beavers moved back in after you left, from the sounds of things. I haven't been up to see it myself, but they're there at the measuring box, as I understand. But that's another problem. And thank you for the work on 29. It's made the road a lot smoother. The downside is, I think that the average speed of traffic on there has increased by 25 to 30% because the road's
I would believe that.
Okay. Do you have anything else in your report before we move on to the purchase of a pickup?
No.
I have a question.
Yes, Suzanne.
What has the price of paving oil done? Everything else has gone down.
It hasn't changed from last. No, the price hasn't changed from last year. The reason is it was all purchased on futures. So we're still paying $430 a ton for asphalt and about $1,200 a load to get it here. And we're already experiencing we'll get you a load, maybe we'll get you a load, we can't get you a load. So we're already fighting that trucking pain in the posterior.
So if it's all purchased on futures, are you expecting it to be a lot less like next year or the year after, or how far ahead are the futures?
I have no idea. I don't dabble in that other than we just purchased the oil. Suncor's been $430 since probably June of last year. It hasn't changed. And it's hard to understand when it's negative $25 a barrel. I get it, but they don't pass that savings along to anybody else because they purchased it at, $55 or $60 a barrel. So that's the peanuts game that we're playing.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions for Pat related to that? If not, we can move on then to his request for the purchase of a pickup. I understand that we had planned for this last year and delivery got delayed, and so we're back in the game. And the supervisor's pickup that Pat has right now has what, 300,000 miles on it, something like that?
317,000.
Okay. So this is an action item. If your questions are all answered, I'll entertain a motion on the purchase of that pickup.
So moved.
Got a motion? Do we have a second?
I would second it. I do have a question on that. Did I understand, did I read correctly that it's natural gas propane?
It's gas,
Okay,
not
Was that-
not propane, not natural gas propane. No, it's just gas. It comes with that prep package because that's built into the gas engine. I downgraded from the diesel engine to a gas engine because of the $11,000 upcharge. I had the money budgeted where I could have done the diesel, but in trying to forecast what's out ahead of us, I think we might be better off saving that for right now and putting it towards something different. The only thing is, so you've got the base price there, the $38,337 as is. I would like to add the one extra thing, which is that the extra key switch, extra key. I'm notorious for having a moment and locking my key in the pickup. Hard to understand, but it happens. So that would actually bring the price to $38,626 with the one extra integrated key.
Thank you, Pat. Are there any other questions or comments from the commissioners on this? If not, we have a motion and a second. Are there any objections? Hearing none, the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for saving this county some money on the $10,000 or $11,000 diesel upgrade.
Perfect.
Okay, Pat, before we go, do you have anything else?
No, I was asked to stay for the SRS discussion, and then there was some federal funding for Fish and Wildlife and Parks and Wildlife or something. So I'll wait till you guys are ready for that.
Okay, well, that's next on the agenda. If there's nothing else under the road and bridge report, we'll move on to general business, administrative items. First
John, excuse
item-
me.
Yes.
So Jay is on.
I'm
Jay's
here.
Okay,
If
I
you can
guess
hear me.
we can roll back to that. Jay,
Okay, I just wanted to
you
make
have
sure you
two
were
items
aware.
here. One is
Can
the
you hear
prairie
me
dog.
okay?
We can hear you. One
Oh,
is the
good.
prairie dog eradication, and the second is a consultant discussion, and both of those are listed as action items. We'll start with the prairie dog. Can you give us the update there and contract status?
USDA, Wildlife Services, Colorado Department of Transportation funds it, and they just go around to airports and help with wildlife problems. Ours is prairie dogs, and they've kind of gotten the better of me on our dirt runway and on the approach end to 2-4. So they're more than happy to come out for a period of a year and put ammonium nitrate or phosphate pills into the holes, and it's a very easy process. It's got very minimal, if any, secondary poisoning, and we can just target the burrows that are along the runway. So the waiver for them is just basically a trespass waiver. We agree to let them come onto the property and apply the treatments as needed. Like I said, it's good for a year and it doesn't cost the county anything. So I'd sure like to have them available. If the prairie dogs resurge a little more, we'd give them a couple of treatments over the year. But that's that on that one.
Thank you. So that's an action item. Do the commissioners have questions of Jay on this?
And do I understand they're going to do that without charge?
Yeah, that's free of charge. It's paid for by CDOT tax revenue from aircraft fuel sales.
Well, in that case, I think that's a great idea.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion on that.
Okay, I'll move that we allow them to do it, or that we move forward on that.
Second,
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or objections, discussion?
The only discussion would be, do you guys want to sign the waiver, or do you want me to while they're here?
I'll
I
defer
think-
that to Trish.
So the current form, it does have Jay's name on it for signature. It is an online form, so I suspect it could be changed with the chairman not presently here. I think that in this meeting, you could delegate that power to Jay, and make sure it's on the record and have him sign, so since it is currently filled out to Jay. for
Okay,
signature.
Suzanne, I would ask you then if you would be willing to modify your motion to include authorization for our airport manager to sign in our behalf.
Yes, I would.
Okay, so we have that motion modified. Jean is a second on that. Do you concur?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, back to the motion. Any other discussion or objections? Hearing none, the motion carries. Okay, next item on Jay's list was a consultant discussion. That's listed as an action item. Not quite sure where we are there. Jay, you want to go ahead and give us an update on that?
Sure. This goes to the CDOT funding, which we currently have, and we're guaranteed for it. And that's 178 or 9,000 for fog seal, protective coating on the runway. Presumably until we get to the funding for the additional asphalt to bring the rating of the runway up. That probably is on the back burner until airline traffic resumes, so that's an unknown. So that makes the fog seal a little more important. What I would like to ask is the ability to go out and sign a contract with a consulting firm of our choice. We'll put it out to bid and give us, be able to give us the specifics on what the specifications for a fog seal on a runway are, any future projects that we may have to include fencing or shortening a runway. We're looking at trying to shorten the dirt runway a little bit to alleviate some prairie dog and rough terrain. We had a consultant when we built the big runway, and it worked, but it wasn't we weren't real happy with the firm at the time. I think there's a lot of hungry consultants out there. There's several working in the valley now that are helping on bigger projects, and it would be convenient to be able to call them and say, would you stop and take a look at this lighting system or our fog seal and help us spec out how to do that. It doesn't cost anything to have them. It's kind of like having somebody on retainer. We have them there until we have a project, which that fog seal is a project coming up. Second to that is, and I don't know how this works. I'd like, we have a fuel system for the jet fuel to come in. We had a bid of 192,000 from the existing manufacturer of our low lead, and 192 is quite a bit more than our bid a couple years ago. I have talked quite a bit with a gentleman that has been in the aviation fuel industry for 30 years. On the downsizing of the COVID, they laid him off. He's interested in doing consulting work on an hourly basis. And I would love to have this guy help because he could help source the same type of equipment to meet the specifications, to be reliability and function wise. I'd love to be able to hire this guy. He's talked about an $85 an hour consulting fee. I don't know if that's something we have to put out to bid. If that's something that I could hire him on this project for this year, and I'd like to propose that. he would be a great benefit to streamline and probably save us a lot of money in being able to work with some of the other manufacturers around the country.
What is the estimate of the number of hours? If it's $95 an hour, is there any estimate on that?
I think, and we kind of talked, I talked to him about it. He thought about 40 hours of his time would be able to put together a really good package and reach out to the vendors and give us a real good set of details to put out to bid for the jet fuel.
Was he
Well,
also good?
Go ahead, Suzanne.
Was he also going to give advice on the fog seal, or did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, those are actually two separate. The consulting firm would be overall airport. They could do the fuel, but their specialty is putting runways and taxiways and lighting and that type of things in. The fuel system, they can do it if we wanted them to. This guy has the inside track with a lifetime virtually of working in aviation fuel systems and contacts.
So if I hear it correctly, we have two proposed consulting projects here. One kind of general, which might include the fog seal and other things related to the airport, and the other being the fuel tank for Jet A. I've opened it up. I guess I'll take the opportunity to speak here. My concern is, without clear directives to consultants, they tend to go on their own path, and we don't necessarily get what we're asking for. So I would feel comfortable, Jay, if you came to us with a specific proposal of what that particular consultant would be doing. That's the vis-a-vis the fog seal on the runway. I would question also, I would assume a lot of that information is already available through either CDOT or the FAA, or there's other experts out there that could answer specific questions to the treatment of the surface of the runway without having to hire a consultant for that purpose. Now, if there are other things that we're thinking about, that conversation should be held within the advisory board and with the commissioners in terms of an overall concept for the airport itself, because we have other issues out there, including the aerobatic box that was discussed yesterday at your meeting. And I would suggest that we need to step back and take a look at what we see this airport being in the future. So if we did go out and get a consultant, I think they need specific directives of our areas of interest. On the fuel, again, kind of the same thing. I don't know how much expertise we need to bring to the table on that. I'm sure there's very specific technical guidelines for Jet A systems, specifically as it relates to fuel contamination, algae, and what have you, and circulating pumps to keep that fuel fresh. It would be helpful if we kind of had that ahead of time, and I'm sure a lot of that information is available open source. Those are my comments. I'll defer to the other commissioners to see if they have thoughts on this.
Can you hear me, John?
Yes, I can.
I think at $85 an hour, I think you're absolutely right. I think we need to have a direction where we're going to go with it. I don't mind the consulting part at all, even at the price or whatever, but I think having a direction where we're going to go and kind of narrow it down between us before we go out there, I think would be a lot better off.
Well, and that'd probably reduce the number of hours that would be needed.
Jay, I guess maybe the commissioners, I'm speaking for them and they can correct me if I'm wrong, that we would like to have a little more specific information on exactly what is involved I know that we're concerned about the airport fund balances and reserves and our income projections at the airport. And so I guess if I'm hearing the commissioners correct, they'd like to have a little more specific information, and maybe this would be a topic for a work session where we could sit and just
Okay.
kind of go over it. Would that work for you, Jay?
You bet.
Thank you. Is that okay with the other commissioners?
I think so.
Thumbs up, head nod. Okay. Jay, if you don't mind, then can you give me a timeline on when you could get back to us for this discussion?
Call it 2 weeks.
Trish, we have a meeting scheduled in 2 weeks, do we not? Or where do we have our work session?
Our work sessions are on Mondays, 10 a.m. And I do suspect perhaps next Monday will be filled, but the following, we don't have anything scheduled.
What's the date for the following one? I don't have a calendar in front of me.
So that would be the 22nd.
Jay, would the 22nd work for you?
I have it in my calendar.
Okay. And if you can get, if possible, if you can gather some information, kind of prepare some sort of a briefing document or summary document that the commissioners could see prior to that work session so that we could familiarize ourselves with the proposal.
Will do.
Thank you, Jay. Do you have anything else, Jay?
Just a couple of quick updates. We had our cattle drive across the runway this morning. That went well. We're still working on finishing the livestock fencing. Generally at the airport, traffic has been pretty good despite the COVID, and I attribute that to our on-airport businesses. We have two of them now. We have the Ron's Maintenance Shop and the Avionics Shop by Michael Bay. Both of them, we counted the other day, we had 13 aircraft on the airport for service, all of which stop and buy fuel and spend money here. So where our traffic from the travelers and vacationers is off, the business traffic at the airport and the revenue from that is up considerably, and it's increasing. People are hearing about our services at the airport and are flocking in here, really. So it's been busy, and we've sold a lot of fuel and had a lot of airplanes, just a different crowd. Other than that, everything is going very well.
Thank you, Jay. Do you have anything on the mini grant in terms of fencing or what you would like to see there if we apply for it?
I do have, I've got a stretch on the west end to close off, and then the long stretch that would be on the north end. And I've got to pull the measurements out again. I'm positive that'll be in a bid process. It'll be over 5,000 or 4,000, whatever the amount was. I think it was 5,000. So we'll be putting in for that application on the mini grant and putting that out to bid to get in before the fall cattle start coming back down.
Okay, and on that, that's a $10,000 total project. The county has to pay a 50% match up to $5,000 for the county. So our total project cost of $10,000.
Correct.
Okay. And again, timing on that, when do you think you'll have your numbers put together?
I've got all the measurements. I just need to put it out and get the estimate on per mile fence, which I don't think has changed from last year.
Thank you. And you'll work together with Trish on that?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
And the only other update is on we still have several hangars that the leases are a little ambiguous, and we're trying to working with Bobby on that, getting the identifying what leases we have. We have some cleaning up to do, and so we're working on that.
Okay, thank you. And Trish, you're aware of that effort, are you? Thank you. Anything else on the airport?
That's all.
Thank you, Jay. Hearing that,
Thank
we'll
you.
go on then, while Pat's still in the room. We'll go.
John,
Yes.
John, excuse me just a second. Hey, on the request for the purchase of the pickup for Patrick, I messed up on that front bid sheet. If you look at the front bid sheet, the key fob added to it made it 38,626, but I did not include in the ask for the money for the spray and bed liner of 495. If we do the spray and bed liner, that would make that pickup 39,121.
Patrick, comments on that? Or do the commissioners have it? Go ahead.
From my perspective, John, we're saving a boatload of cash on the overall price. So if we could include the bed liner, that's great. If not, I understand. Again, we budgeted 50,000 we had for the last 4 years, and we're finally at least to this process where we may be able to get it. So yeah, if we could include that, that'd be great.
Okay, go back to the commissioners and see if they will make the motion to include the bed liner in that purchase.
From my perspective, a bed liner is, for what he's going to use the pickup for, a bed liner is almost a must, that it protects everything, a lot easier to clean. So I will make that motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We've got a second. Any discussion? If not, the motion to include the bed liner in the purchase of a new pickup for the Road and Bridge Department carries. Okay, at that point now we move on to general business administrative items. And the first item on there is the SRS, Secure Rural Schools distribution. And this involves the school districts and our Road and Bridge Department, as I understand it. Trish, you want to open the ball on this one?
Certainly. So that is correct. It involves Road and Bridge, and each of the 3 schools, Del Norte, Monte Vista, and Sargent. Everyone has viewed the paperwork. We did have a discrepancy from 2019 where our previous accountant did include the Title III funds when we allocated the money to the 3 schools and Road and Bridge. Therefore, this is going to be a 2-part discussion. One is what we would like to do with that overpayment. And then the normal distribution of the SRS funds includes, by statute, 25% of those 2020 funds would go to Road and Bridge. 25 would go to the school. A conversation must happen and an agreement between the 3 commissioners, the 3 schools, as to what to do with the remaining 50%.
Okay, so we have a pot of money that's coming down through the SRS system, and there's a Title I and a Title III, is that correct?
That is correct. Title III is for fire mitigation, and it is restricted funds.
Okay, so we're really talking about the Title I funds right now?
Correct.
Okay, and I'm going to go ahead, Suzanne.
As a clarification, is Title III fire mitigation or is it search and rescue?
It is both.
Okay.
Okay, back to it. So we're dealing with Title I funds. I don't have the exact number in my head. The issue is a portion of that goes to Road and Bridge, a portion of it goes to the schools, and then the remaining portion is divvied up as agreed between the schools and the county. There was an inadvertent overpayment to the schools, I believe in 2019, and we need to recapture that. The question is, how do we do that, and what are the schools' position on the funding going forward? I'm not going to make any assumptions now, but I assume well, I am going to make an assumption. No school district's going to let any money slip through their fingers at this point. And so I will open it up to the schools and others for discussion. I see Brian Crowther's on, Leona's on. I don't recognize some of the other names. I can't see everybody, so I'll
Angela Velasquez is here for Del Norte. I know, I believe Chris Burr may be with her.
Okay, well, I'm going to go on my screen, and Brian, you're to the left, and I read from left to right. I'm going to start with you.
You're muted.
Try again. There
Thank you. There we go. All right. Yeah, no, first of all, thank you. You know, we appreciate the funding that has come our way. And as you all know, this is going to be a very tough year for schools. We finished up fourth quarter on a not on a real good note. And so we look forward to possibly getting back. But of course, we got big cuts from the state. I just, to speak what we've done with the SRS monies, we basically have hired our school resource officer from the county, which we appreciate. We feel it's an asset to our school and helps provide a safe environment, and we want to continue to be able to do that. But you're absolutely right. Funding is going to be a very tight year for the schools, and so we look for every opportunity to utilize those dollars the best way we possibly can. So yeah, personally, I really appreciate the county, and would encourage anything that you can share our direction. We certainly want you to know that it goes to good use. We actually you depend on it to employ our school resource official, and as well as other pertinent things.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Leona.
Good morning. I really echo Brian's comments there, both on our appreciation of the county helping take care of us and what we're facing with CDE. We too use our funds, just to let you know what we use them for. We don't call it a resource officer, we call them behavior interventionalists, basically the same thing. We are trying to target all three of our schools, elementary, middle school, high school, with Friday options. Since we're a 4-day school, we try to offer some Friday school options for some of our students that need the extra or just need a safe place to be for a few hours during the day, and then some after school homework help. And that's what these funds go to, is to help partially fund those programs that don't fall under some of the state requirements for education.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the list, I'm reading through the list. I'm going to miss somebody. So Ms. Velasquez, I think you're the next one I can see on here. I can't see you, but I see your name.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
Oh, you lose. No. No, the question is your input on basically what we're talking about is the 50% that is negotiation between the county and the school districts, and the recovery of the overpayment from last year. And Trish can give us those numbers when we get to that point. So we wanted to give you an opportunity to express your desires and needs.
Okay, well, I'm kind of like, I heard part of Brian's. We're in the same situation due to the current COVID situation and the finance situation that we're looking at coming this next fiscal year. We would definitely appreciate the additional money coming through. Our plans for this next fiscal year is to backfill the amount that we will lose from the state funding. Right now, we're probably looking between $250,000 and $300,000. So it would use to supplement the amount that we lose for this next fiscal year.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have comments or questions for the various schools?
I think on the question of what to do with the overpayment from last year, I think in my mind, the only option is to just subtract it from the payment for this year. And that just makes the most sense.
Okay. Commissioner Glover.
Yeah, I agree. I think we just subtract it from the amount, wipe it clean, be done with it completely, and then move forward with what we're going to do with the 50%.
Okay. While we're on it, what I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, is the school would like to get as much of that as they possibly can, and if the county is in a position that we would perhaps, nobody can kick me because I'm at home, which is good. I would suggest that we would strongly consider that that entire 50% would go to the school districts minus the overpayment. Would that make sense?
Okay, John, since you went ahead and said all that, I'll go ahead and say the part I had in my head was, I think we should move forward and give them the 50% as a whole to the school. Go ahead and collect our money out of it like we had the $12,770 that's owed back to us, and then just be complete with it. I
Did-
agree with you.
Thank you.
Did Patrick have anything he'd want to say on it?
Okay,
Don't point it at your
those
ear.
are my sentiments. In light of the current situation with the school budgets and those things, I think it's important that we help go towards that. That amount of money, it's always helpful to Road and Bridge, but you know, we're team players also, and so I would just support your guys' thought in dividing that amongst the districts, and especially in light of the overpayments, because that's gonna cut into it. So I'm absolutely good with that.
Thank you, Pat. Are there any other comments before we put this up for a vote? School districts, anybody? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to grant that the entire 50% go to the school districts of the Title I monies of the SRS program, and that the county will recover the overpayment from last year. That's not well said, but that's what I heard. So,
Okay, do that. I would make that motion, but I would also add that entire 50% plus the 25% that they are supposed to get in the first place.
yes, the total to the schools will be 75% of the SRS Title I funding minus the overpayment.
Yes,
That's your motion?
that's my motion.
And we have a second. Is there any other discussion? Discussion, objections? Hearing none, the motion carries. Is that okay, everybody on the school districts?
We thank you very much. You bet. That's awesome.
Okay, thank you.
John, if you don't mind.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
Go ahead, Angela.
Yeah.
I just want to say thanks from Delmar.
You bet.
would-
Okay, Trish, go
John, I
ahead.
would like to verbalize the amounts just if for no other reason for the minutes.
Yes, please,
For
go ahead.
Deanne, if that's okay with you. So last year's overpayment, the amount that we received for Title III was $12,770.75. Through that, with the population and each portion from each 25% and then 50%, that would deduct from Road and Bridge this year $3,192.69. That same 25% is deducted from the schools 25%. Out of the remaining 50%, Monte Vista is deducted $5,783.83. Del Norte is deducted $2,059.58. Sargent is deducted $1,734.65. This year's 2020 SRS funds received was $152,877.92. That would mean after the deduction, Road and Bridge will receive $35,026.79. The same to the schools for their portion of the 25%. Out of the 50%, it'd be 39 for Monte Vista, $39,211.29. Del Norte is $15,021.53. Sargent is $12,628.08. Just to verbalize the population, this year, Monte Vista had 58.86% of the students in our county. Del Norte 22.35, and Sergeant 18.79.
Okay, I got lost in the numbers. I'll leave it to the professional educators to do the math in their heads. Are you comfortable with the numbers as they were presented?
Yes.
Thank you. Is that a nod, Leon?
Yeah, I am.
We're good
Angela?
with that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you
for
so
your time.
much. Okay, now I got lost in the motion. Have we already approved it?
No, it was approved. That was just for the minutes, given the amounts. We're free to carry on to
Okay,
the
I was
next.
still trying to add up the 79 cents. Thank you so much. Good enough. I guess the next item then is the refuge money distribution. And as I understand it, this is a Monte Vista School District specific issue. Is that correct, Trish?
It is.
Okay. And so we have Monte Vista on. Again, Trish, would you explain what the refuge money distribution is?
So this is a portion, again, of more PILT money, but it comes from lands that are either on or against the refuge. It's the wildlife, fish, and fish. Essentially, in the past, I went back 10 years. It looks as though Monte Vista School District did receive 15% of this money that we sent to them, and Road and Bridge got the remaining 85. Something happened in the last 3 years where it looks like general fund has been absorbing all of it, which is what prompted me to bring this back to light. And I would like to specifically get it in the minutes for people looking at it in the future, that this is something that is for schools and Road and Bridge. So I would like to bring it back to light and make sure the commissioners are okay with going back to Monte Vista School at 15% and Road and Bridge 85% of these funds.
And just to clarify, the 1978 amendment didn't say that it had to go to Road and Bridge or to schools, said it had to go to local governments and could be used for any governmental purpose. So I think there was a comment about that has been the history of how this funding has been spent. And I don't see any reason to deviate from that history, but just wanted to point out that it's not necessarily required to go to Road and Bridge and schools anymore.
Thank you, Ryan. Is Pat Sullivan still in the room, Gene? Before you turn, there we go. Yeah. Pat, what is your input on this?
So obviously we're interested in all funding that we can get, just like any other department, county, government, school. The work that we typically do is around the refuge site area. Those are, work that we do in conjunction with them. Some years we have projects, some years we don't, but projects usually that we do with them are relatively expensive. And again, we utilize the funds that pertain directly to that. It helps the area. As you know, the refuge, we have several roads that border the refuge that are paved, that we take care of. Again, costly. So there again, we've used it in the past, and we would like to continue to have that funding. But I don't get to make that decision, so.
Okay. What about Leona, since this is in your wheelhouse also?
Well, I'll be honest, I had to do the same kind of research Trish did. I've been in this position 3 years, so I kind of came in before I knew what this was. In looking back in the notes that we had, again, we're appreciative for any funding that we get, and the Road and Bridge has always been so good about allowing that additional 50% of the SRS funds to go back to schools. That as a district, we feel like this is one way that they can subsidize their budget as well. and we're thankful for the 15%, but do feel that Road and Bridge does a lot of work on county roads for our school district, obviously right here in Monte Vista. So we're good with that split if that's how it stays, or that division. No problems with that on our end.
Thank you. The other commissioners?
I think I would approve, and I'd make the motion that we do the split as 85% Road and Bridge and 15% Monte Vista.
Commissioner Glover, you're thinking.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? For point of clarification then, before we call the vote, Trish, can you tell us again, this was 15 and 85 split on the money that is basically a payment in lieu of taxes from the Fish and Wildlife Service because of the refuge, which happens to be in the inside the boundaries of the Monte Vista School District, and therefore those payments in lieu of taxes, it is appropriate that they get a share of that.
Correct. And so the clarification is Road and Bridge receives 85%, which is $20,658. Monte Vista School at 15%, which is $3,645. And I would like to point out that I do think that it would be a lot easier if the commissioners could decide how you want to handle this moving forward for future years. It does look like back in 1972, there was a resolution that clearly defined what happened with this money, so it wasn't brought to the board every single year. If you would like to do something like that, or we can bring it to this conversation every year and go on a year by year basis. But I would like that definition of how you would like this money handled in the future.
Okay, if I would presume that right now we want to get this year's question answered right now, and that the county could consider a resolution kind of establishing how we're going to handle this going forward. Again, in conversation with Road and Bridge and the school district. And then I'll defer to Ryan on that if he thinks that's the appropriate approach to it. We understand that future commissioners, we can't bind them necessarily, but we could at least have something that takes care of it in the interim.
I'll look at that resolution, Trish. If that resolution hasn't been rescinded or amended or otherwise nullified, then I would say that even if it's a 1972 amendment, 1972 resolution, then it would still be in effect.
Thank you. But for the purposes of this year and the 2021 funding, or is it 2020 money we're talking about? Which is it?
So the way that this works, it is 2019 money that we receive in 2020.
Okay, so money received this year to be distributed. Okay, so we have a motion and a second on this, that we do the split as defined. Are there any other questions, discussion, or objections? Seeing and hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you. And thank you, Leona. I do appreciate it. And Pat, thank you for sticking around and taking time out of your day for this. Is there anything else before we move on to the next item, which is the D Mountain Parks and Recreation Review and possible action? If not, we'll move on to that. Ryan, as I understand, you had prepared some documents and you had some suggestions on how we handle this going forward.
Yes, so I worked yesterday with Gene Farish, who represents the town of Del Norte and its board of trustees, and we drafted a memorandum of understanding, basically spelling out the history of the previous resolutions to assign and assume the grant agreement and responsibility for administering the grant for the linear walking trail that is adjacent and connected to the school district property. I had advised by way of email that it might make some sense for the board to consider and take action with respect to that MOU with the Board of Trustees for the town of Del Norte, but not to take any formal action at this point in time regarding a resolution to assign that interest in the grant agreement or change the grant administrator, because there were a couple of legal issues I wanted to look into. One being co-ownership of a well that may or may not be on the property. Yesterday was the first time I'd heard anything about the well on the property and a co-ownership issue. But also because the MOU is referenced and incorporated by reference in that in any resolution that would be passed, then I think it makes sense to make sure that we actually have a signed MOU with the town of Del Norte before proceeding toward that resolution assigning the grant agreement.
Comments from the commissioners?
I think it's good advice, Ryan. I think we ought to hold off till we get them answered.
I couldn't quite hear you, but was it basically you agreed with Ryan's suggestion?
Yes.
Okay. And Suzanne Bothell.
I think Ryan, I agree with Ryan's suggestions.
Thank you. And I see we have representatives from the Recreation District, Jessica Lovelace and Patty Kelly. Do you have comments or thoughts on this?
Not at this time.
Thank you, Patty. Jessica, anything there?
I'm not sure she's
Sorry,
there.
I was just muted. No, nothing to add at this time.
So if I hear correctly, what we're proposing is that we go ahead and execute or at least proffer the MOU between Del Norte and the county, referencing specifically this original agreement that we had but had never executed in terms of transferring the GOCO grant and the land to the town of Del Norte. And in the meantime, we're going to continue discussion about the D Mountain proposal, and we're going to clear up some of the fuzzy edges and make sure that we're doing it properly.
That was well said.
You like the word fuzzy? Is that?
The only other thing I'd add is I believe that the Board of Trustees has this on its agenda for this evening. I'm not exactly sure what time their meeting is, but I believe Jean told me they would get this on the agenda. So we'll just make sure that we get signed copies of everything before we incorporate them into anything else.
So I would entertain a motion to approve the MOU between Del Norte and the town and the county, Rio Grande County.
I would make that motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Good. We have a motion and a second. Any objections, other discussion? If not, the motion carries. Specifically, this is an MOU between Del Norte and Rio Grande County. Ryan, do you need all the commissioners' signature on this, or do you just need mine, or who do you need?
Just the chairs.
Okay. Now I can come in. I'm coming in today anyhow. I can come in and physically sign any documents if they're prepared. Okay, that's what we'll do. Before we move on, is there anything else from Jessica or Patty?
Yeah, I have a question about the pump that you brought up and the possible joint ownership of it. Who are the owners of it?
I have no idea.
Oh.
That's part of the reason I didn't want to move forward on that.
Right.
I think Trish has a little more information that she received, and I can get with her and try to hammer out those details and figure out those fuzzy areas that John referenced before we go forward.
Are there any other fuzzy areas we need to be aware of?
The only thing that I would bring up is, since the school was initially contemplated as part of that grant agreement, and I'm not sure if we can look at records as to what they actually contributed thus far. I know that they definitely did not maintain their financial obligation with respect to that grant, and they certainly haven't maintained the property as they were required to. But I'd just be curious as to what payments, if any, they have made, to know what, if any, involvement they should have in this process.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think that's fair.
And I don't know, Trish, if you have access to that information or if we can get that.
So I did look into this about 8 months ago very deeply, and really came across a lot of dead ends. The one point that I did not do was have the school provide any information about what they did contribute financially back with that First Go Cook grant. I do believe Gene Glover mentioned that he did speak to the school and they haven't presented and asked for that very same thing, and they did not present it. Gene, correct me if I'm speaking incorrectly, but they didn't present it to Gene either. So that would be the only thing that we really, I sat with the treasurer. She has found nothing.
Okay. Yeah, and that's the thing, is those grant agreements purport to create a financial obligation on the part of the school, a fairly significant one. But again, I guess we're just not aware of anything they actually did contribute, which may mean that they have no dog in this fight.
Just to follow up on our end, we have had loose conversations with the school, so nothing formal. I just want to clarify that. Also regarding the same information, because we were just trying to find out, you know, in terms of understanding more of what our maintenance costs going forward, et cetera, would be. So we were trying to get their financial documents to know where they've been. And similar situation, we have not been able to get anything from the school. They did tell us, again, loosely, at one point in time that they had made payments toward the land, but they didn't have records of it. So we're not sure. Again, we haven't seen any actual documentation, though we've requested that as well.
Okay.
Ryan, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay.
And I guess the other thing that Jessica points out is that the school has at least actual notice, if not, or constructive notice, if not actual notice, that we're at least proceeding in this direction.
Okay.
So is there any other discussion on this right now?
None.
So for clarification, the MOU between Del Norte and Rio Grande County will be submitted to the town of Del Norte for their consideration probably tonight at their council meeting. We will continue doing research on our end to find out what's going on with the property, and we'll continue having this conversation with representatives from the D Mountain Recreation District to see if we can facilitate either transfer the property in the most efficacious use of that piece of dirt out there. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for your effort.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us into another fuzzy area, and that is the coronavirus relief fund. Is there something there? I thought I heard somebody say something. Nope. Okay. The coronavirus relief fund. Trish, I see you grabbed a bunch of papers. Is it relevant to that?
Yeah, I did print one thing that I wanted to just make sure to have in front of me just for this topic. So mainly I put this on the agenda to organize a collaborative effort with the towns in a possible work session. We have till July 7th to come together with an agreement and turn it into the state with what to do with the CARES Act funds. So I wanted to get that ball rolling sooner than later and see if we can get that scheduled.
Thank you. As I understand, there's a June 30th. Is it June 30th or July deadline for submission of this request to the Department of Local Affairs?
I have heard it is the first week of July. I mean, I will confirm that because I do think it teetered back and forth a little bit, but essentially 30 days.
Okay.
And we're a little bit past that from June 1st.
Yeah, we're pushing it pretty hard, and so we need to have that conversation with the representatives from the various towns. I've seen the examples that or templates that you sent out, Trish. Two of them were somewhat vague in how the monies would be handled. One of them from Elbert County was very specific that each town and the county got specific amounts. As I understand our conversations, if the county basically acts as a clearinghouse for the town requests for reimbursements, that if there's a mistake made, that the county could be liable for the funds that were requested inappropriately. Is that correct?
Yeah, so with the examples that you received, there are two different ways that the county could handle this. One would be that we take on the entire amount and we have an agreement with the towns on our own, and as they incur expenses, we would reimburse the town, but yet we would submit it to DOLA. So we would have full control of all of those funds.
And liability.
And liability. The downfall with that, mostly the larger counties are the ones that are doing that because they do have the financial staff in order to handle those tasks. It has been not suggested from CCI that a smaller county as our own should not actually go that route, but it is an option for us. The other one would be that a joint conversation and agreement between ourselves and our towns and municipalities, and we send this letter or MOA and define how much money each town receives. Once we do that, each town is responsible for asking for reimbursement through DOLA, and they are responsible themselves. The county is out of it. Any unspent funds will go back to the reserve that DOLA is holding. The other interesting option with this money, it's not just for our own COVID expenses or the town's COVID expenses. It can also be given in grant form to businesses for lost revenue. So there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen, and it does have to happen between ourselves and the towns. South Fork and Center has already reached out to me, and I know, well, Del Norte was here till just a moment ago, but I'm sure they're eagerly waiting as well.
Okay, a question for you. This morning when I was going through minutes, there was a discussion about, the hospitals and medical practices, that it got to the point where the state said they couldn't charge for the COVID test.
Okay.
And so it was the medical entities that were taking on that cost. That would be an eligible expense, I'm assuming, right?
I mean, the hospitals are not involved in this. If you wanted to consider them as one of the businesses that,
because I was thinking, I know Arlene mentioned
help,
that it was the tests are $135, $150 a piece, and that they were not allowed to charge
I think
for
that
them.
price keeps changing.
I think so too. But whatever the price is.
Yeah, the last I heard, which was actually this morning, is Arlene was mentioning $100. So I think maybe it went down.
It might be getting less.
But regardless, they're still having to absorb some expense at this point. So
Correct.
we could, Gene, before I say anything, do you have something to say on this?
John, the other thing I've got is I sat in on the CCI meeting yesterday, and they talked about several different things, but as short term as we are right now and trying to get this done, I think our best bet is just to try to have those meetings together with the municipalities, kind of come up with an idea what we can do and just get the thing started. There's lots of things you can do with the money after it's there, but we need to get the program going.
Okay. Then Trish and Ryan, weigh in on this at any time. I'm trying to put together the structure in my head in terms of how I have the meetings and decide exactly which approach we're going to take. I would assume this is something that would best take place in a work session, which would be available to the public. And if you could contact the cities and arrange for that meeting, I would suggest that we do it in our next scheduled work session, which I believe is Monday. Is that
Monday
correct?
the 15th. Yes.
And then that we have as close as we can get it, good hard facts on how this money can be spent, and specifically, one you've already addressed is the liability if the county acts as the clearinghouse for this, or if the municipalities deal directly with DOLA themselves. And secondly, the potential overlap between requests to FEMA for reimbursement for COVID-related expenses and how that might overlap with the CARES Act funding, so that we don't find ourselves trying to double dip or get ourselves in trouble there. If we can get good solid clarification on that prior to that meeting, I think it'll help us come to some accommodation with the municipalities.
And John, commissioners, would you be interested in reviewing the templates that I've received on those MOUs from, I have one from Garfield County and also one from Larimer County.
I would.
Okay, I'll share those.
Jane, give us a thumbs up or down. Up's good. Okay, Ryan, if you could do that for us, then we got a neutral over there from Trish. Okay. But the more information we can have for our Monday meeting, and if possible prior to it, so we can review it ahead of time. And we'll leave it to Trish to set up the meeting with the municipalities. And we'll have this on the schedule for our work session on Monday the 15th. Is that it for discussion on the COVID relief fund monies? If that's it, we're going to move on. We're now into public health business. And the first item on this is the variance request for a septic system in Jasper. Do we need to have Randy back in the room for this conversation?
I can certainly go get him.
He's here.
Oh.
He's here. He's here.
Okay. So, Randy, I believe the commissioners have all had a chance to review the documents you provided, including schematics and recommendations from the engineering firm. Do you have any other comments and recommendation on this?
No, we've discussed at the last two meetings, I believe, and per the board's request, we did receive the written formal application for lots 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, block 38, Cornwall subdivision in Rio Grande County. I think we're all aware of what the variance request was, along with the proposed plan by Mountain Engineering. So it appears we have a complete application. Last meeting, you discussed whether it would require a public hearing or not, and on an individual basis. I think the board's consensus was no, on an individual basis. You didn't need to hold a public hearing. So yeah, I think we're down to whether you approve the variance or not.
Okay. Commissioners, comments?
I think we've had lots of information on this, and I don't see any reason not to approve it. So I would move that we do.
So we have a motion to approve the variance request. Do we have a second?
Second.
Just wave your hand, Gene. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
I don't even see Dean anymore.
He gave us a thumb up. I saw a thumb.
Yeah, I'll give you a thumb up and a second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to approve the variance request for the septic system in Jasper. Yes, Trish, I saw you wave your hand. Do you have something to say?
Oh, it looks like Randy's doing it. I was just trying to motion to someone to tell Gene to fix the computer.
Okay. So I have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion or objections?
John, I'll just add that I reviewed the application along with the letter that was submitted, compared that to Reg 43, both the county's Reg 43 and state Reg 43. The request does appear to be a site-specific request. It includes the technical justification. There is discussion of alternatives to the variance request. There is technical documentation contained within the request that the variance would not increase the risk to public health or environment. And there's a statement of the hardship that would be caused if they were to comply with the OWTS requirements. And so I believe that the request as submitted checks all of the boxes And the county would be in the clear to approve this if it were so inclined.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or comment? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion carries and the variance is granted. Okay, that moves us on to the contact tracing volunteer discussion and action. Paul, I see you're on. I'll open it up for you.
Well, thank you, commissioners. I wanted to bring forth to you here today discussion that I brought to you in Monday's work session about contracting with some local professional individuals related to contact tracing. And I had identified 6 individuals that would potentially be available for this service. Was hoping to try to get at least 2 of these individuals onboarded and up and going as soon as possible. I kind of drafted a contract over the last couple days and provided that to you, Trish, and Ryan, I believed, hoping for some suggested edits related to the county's verbiage they prefer to use. And I'm hoping to get permission to go forward with this today.
Thank you, Paul. Commissioners, comments?
Ryan, were you happy with that contract?
Yes, and hopefully everyone got my edits this morning. I didn't do anything special, just included the information that Trish provided, since it's already in, I guess, language and verbiage that the county is already comfortable with. I just incorporated that. Paul and Trish did all of the work, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Glover, comments, questions?
I think we ought to just go ahead and go forward with the process to get these people in place.
If I understand correctly, we agreed to an hourly rate and that we were going to let our public health director use his discretion and how he was going to hire these people and utilize their services. And that we'd hopefully be able to recapture these monies from FEMA or the CARES Act, whichever is appropriate. And if we can't recover it, the county will just have to absorb it as part of providing the necessary and essential services during this time.
I could also add that I am aware of a potential grant that I will be able to view this coming week, put out by CDPHE, that is meant to assist with COVID-related activities, and I believe it may be able to help pay for this additional contractors as well. So there may be an additional funding source that I've located.
Are there any other questions or comments?
In light of what Paul just said, I would just, if you wouldn't mind, when you are in those conversations with CDPHE, the one thing with both FEMA and the CARES Act is they're very strict on budgeted employees and use of them under a different title. So to answer John's question, I mean, and yours, these 2 people definitely would fall into FEMA and CARES Act, both because they are people we would not hire if it weren't for COVID. So they're brand new positions due to COVID. What I would like you to do is pay attention and try to maybe even focus questions on the CDPHE, what they are willing to help with for our current employees who are not doing their current jobs because they are handling nearly 99% COVID activities. So if you wouldn't mind just doing that. And I also wanted to verbalize for the minutes exactly how that works, that these 2 employees would not be hired if it were contracted if it weren't for COVID.
Then as I understand, Paul, you have 2 initially that you're considering, but that you also have others there that are available to us on an as-needed basis?
That is correct. I mean, in light of them viewing the contracts themselves and actually making the agreement, I do have 6 individuals, and I believe it's only appropriate to onboard 2 at this point in time, given our current situation.
But, and then, as I understand, I'm restating something I said earlier, that this is at the discretion of the Director of the Public Health Department, and he will coordinate with the county administration, specifically the administrator, to see how we can fund this going forward.
Absolutely, sir.
Can I
Any
just
other
ask?
comments or suggestions from the commissioners or a motion?
Ryan, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say that and it has nothing to do with discussion, but just to make sure that the minutes in this meeting reflect and reference these individuals as consultants, not employees. There were a couple times Trish referred to them as employees, and I just want to make it very clear that they are not employees.
Yes.
Thank you, Ryan.
I had said hired and contracted.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you for the clarification.
I would make the motion that we give the public health director the leeway to hire these people or to a contract with these consultants as necessary. And if we need to increase the number, that you have that leeway to do that as per this contract.
If I could modify your motion just slightly, I would change the word leeway to authority.
Okay.
Thank you. Gene, you never get a chance to make the motion, so I'm sorry.
I know. I'm too polite. No, not really. A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussions or objections? Hearing none, the motion carries. Paul, do you have anything else for us before we move on?
I do not believe so. I am going to work on reaching out to these individuals and trying to gain contact with them and get them on board and working here. Unless you were in need of any updates from me, I have nothing else.
Other commissioners?
Thanks.
Gene's good.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you
so
all.
much, Paul. Appreciate your time on this. I know you're busy.
Thank you for your time as well, sir. Thank you.
Do we need Paul for the general discussion regarding COVID in a couple things down the agenda?
We have it. We have our next item is Tony Steffen's grant update and the CTC grant, or actually the ETR grant amendment. Those would be the next items. Are you suggesting we move the general discussion up, or do you want to deal with this first as it's on the agenda?
I was just wondering if Paul had anything to give to the general discussion regarding COVID that's after this other one. If he doesn't have anything, I don't guess there's anything that we need to move around.
I don't have anything directly pertinent I mean, if there's direct questions or we need an update of current numbers or situations, I'd be glad to give out that information. I didn't have anything, no alarming news to give to anybody or anything like that.
Thank you, Paul. Unless you have specific questions at this point, we'll move on to the next item then, if that's okay. Suzanne, does that satisfy your question?
Yeah, that's fine. I just thought if we were going to need Paul, now's a good time to have him on the hook.
We need him, but he needs to work. So, okay. Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you, Suzanne. Okay, Tony, you're going to be up. You're going to give us a grant update at this point.
So my update would be that most of what I've been working on is catching up on the invoices. And can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Is catching up on the invoices and filling in the master spreadsheet that's going to tell us what we still have yet to try to spend for the end of this month and make sure that we're meeting our goals there. We're halfway through March. I have some very specific questions for a few of the grants, and I'm going to talk to the guys who are working on those and try and get that sorted out by the end of the week. Yeah.
Okay, Tony, I had a specific question, if I may, with the indulgence of the commissioners. When we talked last, in a meeting that we held. You mentioned that for this year, when I'm talking about the 2020 calendar year, so the last half of the 2020 fiscal year,
Okay.
that we had only invoiced and received 7% of some of the money we should have been invoicing for on some of the grants. Is that, did I hear that correctly?
I don't know where 7%.
No, so John, I think you're confusing my financial update with Tony. So from the time that we've assigned Tony to help get us caught up, January invoices in some particular grants hadn't even been submitted for reimbursement. So really no percent. The percentage is on my financial update that I emailed you. So there might be a little confusion, but yes, certainly with HCC and a number of other grants had not been invoiced back to January.
Okay, HCC being the Healthcare Coalition and other grants. Am I hearing that correctly? So Tony, I guess I was asking you the wrong question. So,
Okay.
but as I understand, then you've been working to make sure that we get caught up on all of this invoicing so that we get reimbursed, the county gets reimbursed
Right.
for basically money's already spent.
Yes, all of this has already been spent. And I'm thinking that for the invoicing portion, by the end of next week, we should be caught up through May.
Thank you so much. I'm going to bring up another one that's kind of an ambiguous area. I know we discussed it, but I wanted to have a chance to revisit it because it's coming up again, and that is the infamous stipends.
Okay.
And how those were allocated. I'm going to make a statement here of as how I understand that process, and then correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
As I understand, this was primarily under the Healthcare Coalition portion of our activities, and that stipends were given either to individuals who attended meetings, Healthcare Coalition meetings, or agencies who sent representatives to those meetings. Is that correct?
I don't honestly have that. I don't know.
I can answer
we don't
that.
have contracts in place to say explicitly what a person would have done to get those funds.
Okay, so we don't have contracts. Trish, you saw the checks. Did I give an accurate accounting?
Correct. So what it is they are all part of entities, but for some reason, some of the checks were made to the individual people, whereas some were to the entity. There was no consistency there. So they are all representatives of an entity. There are not, as far as I know, any single people that have just joined this coalition. They have to, by their bylaws even, they have to be representing an entity.
So they're representing some organization, whether it's a governmental entity or perhaps some healthcare provider or something of that nature.
Correct.
Some entity that has an interest in the Healthcare Coalition.
Correct.
And I'm assuming these stipends were for attending meetings. Was that correct?
So what Tony was trying to say was on that contract, there was zero guidance as to what those stipends were to include. And in fact, correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, in the 2019 that ends in, no, I'm sorry, 2018 that ended in June 2019, those stipends were not included in the contract period. It was an add-in after the fact. This year, which would consist of the end of 2019 through June 2020. This was added something into the contract, which included the stipends, but those stipends did have certain deliverables that needed to be met. So each entity that's on the steering committee has to accomplish A, B, C, D in order to receive that stipend. That's what's written in this year that's ending's contract.
And the Healthcare Coalition meets periodically. Can you tell me how often they meet?
believe they were meeting quarterly. Their meetings were changed in response to COVID. The group is meant to be a part of that response. That's what they're planning for. So the meeting schedule had likely changed at that point.
Okay. But absent the COVID response, they would have been meeting quarterly, that is 4 times a year.
That's what I understand. And then they would be doing work in between those meetings, and still they have many deliverables in this grant that they need to provide by the end of the year. So they would be going back and forth with all of that, and then they would just come together for a meeting.
Now, Tony, how involved are you in that healthcare coalition grant, or is most of that handled by Cynthia Ford, who I understand is a contract hire to administer that grant?
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious. I hadn't really touched this one at all. I didn't go to any of the meetings. I'm just trying to get a sense for what it is and how it works now.
Okay, thank you. But arguably, it could be said that absent the pandemic, that they were essentially getting some thousands of dollars for attending 4 meetings a year and maybe some other stuff in between. But that, am I reading that correctly? I guess Trish, since you're the one that works directly with Cynthia.
Yeah, I've just been kind of playing catch up in trying to assist Tony and understand that particular grant as a whole. So yes, in previous years, to be exact, they did not include any deliverables. It looks as though it was just for meeting taking. After last year, from what I understand, there was an issue with these stipends. They were almost not paid through. I've yet to confirm that because I haven't talked to anyone yet, but that is why they this year were included with deliverables.
Thank you. The other commissioners have questions or comments on this?
I'm good.
Thank you. Jane's good also. Okay, Tony, do you have anything else on the update side before we move on to the ETR grant amendment?
No, by the next time I get together with you guys, we should have a nice, concise view of the spending for the year, but right now, that's it.
Okay. Then we'll move on to the ETR grant amendment. You know how I feel about acronyms. What does ETR stand for?
Emergency Preparedness Response.
Oh, EPR, Papa, okay. Emergency Preparedness Response.
Yes.
And we have a contract in front of us. I'm going to confess I ran out of time this morning and did not get to read all of that. Is there anything that we need to focus on in that grant that you're aware of, Tony?
That's probably best because I misled Trish a little bit this morning. I guess I was groggy. What you're looking at right now is an amendment that extends the grant into next year. This is one of those multiple year grants. So this is going to start in July. Yeah, the other funding that we're receiving, we do have about $17,000, and I'm going to take that, what information I have, up to Trish after she's done with meetings today and let her see what that conversation was about. But that's coming from CDPHE through the EPR, Emergency Preparedness Response, as well, but that's a separate funding item. So right now you're just looking at next year's actual budget for our existing program.
Okay. Commissioners, I assume that you've also had a chance to look at the document. Do you have any concerns?
I don't know that I do.
I don't know. I don't right now. I think Tony's got a good handle on this. It's in very capable hands.
Okay, that being said, I'll entertain a motion then to approve this grant extension. Here's your chance, Gene.
I make a motion to approve this grant extension.
Did you hear that? I love that little beginning. And I second it.
You seconded it. We have a motion and a second to approve the EPR grant amendment, extension. If there are no objections or further discussion, the motion carries. Okay. Is there anything else, Tony, that you have for us at this point? If I don't hear any, I assume that we have a well-oiled machine here and that everybody who needs to talk to each other is doing so, and that the information is flowing through the system efficiently. And I do appreciate it, and thank you for the update, Tony.
Thanks.
This brings us to the general discussion regarding COVID-19. Is there anything beyond what we've already discussed surrounding COVID-19?
John, this is Lindsay with the newspaper. I'm not sure if I missed it earlier, but do we have numbers for today?
Go back to that. Trish, did we get anything on the morning call? I see your lips moving, but I don't hear anything.
Sorry, forgot to unmute. We do have 3 additional cases as of this morning, which makes 16 active and 49 to date.
Did that answer your question, Lindsay?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. So, anything else under general discussion regarding COVID-19? Yes, no. Okay. No. Okay. No, no's, and no's. And Trish, did you have anything?
I do not.
Okay. Then we'll move on then to unfinished business. And that takes us to the equally infamous governing policy. And just for those who are not familiar on here, in the past, each year, the county commissioners have adopted a governing policy, the basic content of which, the body of which, basically explains duties, responsibilities, and governing philosophy for the county, for the commissioners, and for the staff, and how we all interact. That core language has basically been unmodified since 2015. What we do look at every year is what are our goals going forward? And typically that would be kind of broad concept policy things from the commissioners. Would not be too detailed, but given some of the challenges that the county has faced in the last couple of years, where we've had personnel turnover, new administrators coming in. I think we've had, 3 new administrators at some point or another through this process. The commissioners have kind of been pushed into getting it kind of down into the weeds on this, maybe a little bit in a micromanaging sense, which is not typically what we would do, but it is our responsibility to do that when required. And so, generally speaking, on this governing policy, we go through and we talk about many things, which I'm not going to go through the whole thing. The policy itself is, I don't know, 20 some pages or maybe 20 pages long or so. But, and that's available for anybody to read. An area of emphasis, because sometimes new commissioners come in, new staff comes in, and we kind of forget to look. And I will say this, when I took office personally, I was unaware of this document and did not even find out about its existence until late last year, I believe. And when I went through there, I read, and a lot of the questions that we have are already answered in here. For instance, I'm just throwing these out as examples. At least every 5 years, according to a schedule, that we are supposed to undergo a sunset review for all boards and commissions. Well, I don't know when the last time that happened was, but it's in here, and it's in here for a reason. It's probably something that we should pay attention to. We talk about delegating subsidiary decisions, how we go about authorizing the county administrator to do certain things. Today, we authorized our airport manager to sign a contract or an application, those sorts of things we do. And one of the big things here is no individual member of the Board of County Commissioners has the authority over the county administrator or appointed department heads. That's another way of saying that we don't act as individuals unless we are given by the board specific authorization to act in a supervisory or an authority capacity over specific items or over specific parts of the county. In our county, typically we delegate these responsibilities to our department heads and we trust them to do their job. So those, I would suggest that all of us as commissioners and the administrator and others review and become familiar with the contents of this, because it's awfully easy to cross the lines and not even recognize. That being said, I'm going to stop there. Commissioners, do you have comments on that little monologue? Or Ryan, Trish, anybody? Your thoughts on that part of it?
I agree. That's what it says.
Gene, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree too. I don't think I spent enough time reading through that thing, as well as, like you said, you didn't even get it till late last year on your side. So there's probably a lot in there that a guy needs to review and constantly keep up with. So,
well, that sounds good. Trish, as the administrator, this affects you also. What are your thoughts?
I'm eager for the parts that refer to what we intend to do for the 2020 year, 2021 year.
So
Outside of that,
you want to jump down to the goals and
I
aspirations?
want to get to the bullseye, to the goals. I think the document in itself has been around with the same language. I think it's written quite well. I don't see any issues with it. It does look like it was a document that was signed yearly for quite some time. I'd like to get back in that practice, because by now you guys know how I am. Kind of get it done.
I do have one typo that's been carried forward for the last 5 years. Trish, just to make note of it, on page 9, and it is section 1.6.4, and it says boards or commissions are not created by the board to advise staff that should be advised. Okay? But it also does speak to boards and commissions, and I know we've had an awful lot of confusion about lines of responsibility, authority, and reporting responsibilities with our various boards and commissions, and pretty clearly spelled out right in this document. But I will defer to Trish's anxiousness and get down to board objectives and work plan for 2020. They're general. Some of them are specific because they address specific things that have come up. I don't know if that have come up. They're kind of detailed and would normally be an administrative function. As I understand, Trish, some of these things you've already addressed or in your office are being addressed. Comment on that?
Yeah. And those plus some more. So a lot of them have already, we've even approved some of them, but yes, it's in the works and will be finalized.
Okay, and so that's an administrator function, and you'll be bringing all that to the board as appropriate then going forward.
Correct.
Okay. You guys, the commissioners should have this in front of them. If they don't, bet on you. But have you had a chance to review the objectives in the work plan for 2020 as it was just a list of suggested items? I assume Suzanne's trying to read it on the computer right now.
I am. I've read it, but I was quickly reviewing it to see what else I might have in mind.
Gene, it's unfair to you to ambush you with this. Have you had any thoughts while you're looking over there in the pile?
the stuff that I've gone through on my end of setting for the goals and stuff, is that what we're still looking for?
Yeah, we're down, we've buzzed through to page 16, which is the goals and objectives. And since we're halfway through 2020, I have a hunch that any of these that we feel need to be really dealt with may carry over into 2021. But we'll revisit that when we reaccomplish this document towards the end of the year.
I think my biggest goals is to continue to work. Trish has started this program, and with the pest board and stuff, we've all been working on that, trying to get the pest district lined out, the tourism board. Want to see those come to fruition, the bylaws updated and everything put in place. But I'm also working on, with my appointment to the Safe Routes to Schools on the state level, it gives me a little bit of leverage that I can work on things like the Safe Routes to School program over in the center area. There's completions I want to get to there. My goal is to make that program work. If we can help make it work for Del North's new streets and stuff, I want to do that for the school here. And then Colorado Health Pool is another big one. We work on the insurance rates and stuff on that board quite a bit. So I'm really looking forward to continuing working on that.
Great. Suzanne, what about you?
Okay. One of the other things that is not on this list already that we do need to do is there are still a lot of policies that need to be written / approved. And a lot of these go back to the recommendations from the federal and state audits on grants and whatnot, and as well as our own county audit. I know we've been dinged on our county audit for not having all of our policies in line and up to date on some of those things. And so I do think we need to look at all of those policies again and make a concerted effort to get them all done.
Trish, you want to weigh in on that?
Oh, definitely. You know, from the moment I walked in, that was top priority. We've completed all of the federal deficiencies from our federal audits. So I have completed those, which will come in quite handy for now receiving money from FEMA and CARES Act, because they will need to be in place for that. So the federal are finalized. When it comes to our state and regular auditor, these are deficiencies from 2015. The procedures have been put in place. So, and I did have my discussion with the auditors yesterday that will help. We do need those procedures that I have implemented on paper and passed. I do have many of those just about finished. So it's kind of with all the extra work that's been handed to my office, I have put those to the side, but the procedures are finalized.
And if I understand correctly, and speaking with the auditor, we're going through an audit right now, or in the process that
just began. Yes.
That just began, and that while we may not have adopted policies specifically, we do have procedures in place that do comply with federal and state requirements.
The federal policies are in place, and it's with the state that the procedures are in place and have been implemented. We just have to finish up some of the written policies.
I would, if I may indulge me here, if you will, I'd like to make a suggestion, and I don't know if this would fit into our work session on Monday, because that CARES Act conversation may take up a good portion of our time. But I would ask the commissioners to look through that suggested list and prioritize those that we might want to implement or deal with this year. Get them in place, and those things that can move to later in the year or into next year, that we identify those. And I'm going to speak to one specifically, and Ryan, you can beat me up on this. The railroad issue is heating up. I haven't been talking about it at length, and I won't go into the details now, but in terms of county input on the potential sale of the SLRG and its effects on the county and our economy and areas of specific interest that we as commissioners may have, we're going to have to be prepared to deal with that probably sooner rather than later. A tentative target date for the sale of the SLRG is September, but they have been getting expressions of interest and have even done kind of a tentative bid proposal. The bankruptcy trustee has, and the bankruptcy trustee has not, to my knowledge, communicated at all with the counties in general, and specifically not Rio Grande County, as to what our specific public interest issues may in fact be. And that is something that is statutorily required to be considered in the process. And so at some point in the near future, we probably have to go back and agonizingly go through the railroad issue again, and probably need to be speaking with the other counties. So I would ask that we put that on a kind of up on the list to deal with in the near term. And then do you all have other comments or suggestions of things that we deal with right now or soon?
And I do believe COVID has kind of sucked all the air out of the room. And so it kind of has put itself in a place of priority. And so some of these things may fall down further on the list.
Gene, your thoughts?
John, I agree with you 100% on the railroad. I think it's imperative at this point that if we think the cells kind of lined up, I think we need to get together and get that conversation going between all of us, because we definitely want to protect that entity all we can on there. Thank you. Thanks for all your work on that too.
Oh, it's been an education, let's put it that way, I think, for all of us. Okay, well, I'll leave it to the other commissioners and Trish to take a look at what we think is going to happen on Monday. And if we don't really have time to look at this, we can defer it maybe to the next time. But I would appreciate it if you all have a chance to go through this and kind of just make your priority list and your comments on it. And please add to the list if you see if you think of something that's not on there. I'm editorializing here a little bit, again, if you'll indulge me. We find ourselves so often having to deal with an immediate problem. Some of those problems are self-induced because of things that either happened in the past and weren't not documented. We can't find exactly what happened on any particular event. It's been a challenge trying to reconstruct some of these things. And we get kind of we are forced into short-sighted focus. And I believe that part of our job as commissioners is to look down the road, decades down the road, to make sure that whatever we decide today is consistent with kind of a goal going forward for the best interest of our county. What do we want this county to look like? And we don't want to leave behind a messy trail for somebody else or for our successors to come in and have to clean up and start swearing at us and painting graffiti on our gravestones. So if we can kind of keep a little bit of that concept in mind as we go forward, I think it would be helpful. I don't have anything else to add to this particular discussion. Does anybody else have a thought?
Did you say we were going to talk about this on Monday also?
I said I would defer it to you all if you had something specific to bring, but with Trish, we'll be looking at what might be involved in the CARES Act conversation with municipalities, and that may suck all the air out of the room. And so I don't want to overload that work session and drag it out. And the CARES Act money may take every brain cell I have, and perhaps yours too, or I don't know. And maybe we need to push this down to another work session, but I would like to see it come up soon as practical.
Mhm. I think that sounds good.
Okay, Brian, you have thoughts?
My only thing would be with respect to the railroad. I don't know how often the Valley County Commissioners are meeting, but to make sure that it's on their agenda so that you're having discussion and that the counties collaboratively can object in the bankruptcy proceeding if the trustee is contemplating a distribution that doesn't take into account the county's public interest.
Thank you, Ryan. Anything else on this topic? And this is all under the governing policy. Hearing none, we can get back to the agenda then, which I have to find. That was unfinished business. We are now down to commissioners and administrator updates, and we have onto that financial report.
If you guys don't mind, I'd like to share my screen, just kind of makes it a little bit easier for not only yourselves, but for our visitors, mostly because this was on the agenda last meeting and we didn't get to it, so you may have lost the documents. I'm gonna go ahead and share.